One of the key elements for the writing of demons within Kimetsu no Yaiba is the focus on how their actions now may be unforgivable, but they were all once humans to begin with. People who were dealt an unfortunate hand by fate and ended up striding down this monstrous path for one reason or another. Be it like Daki and Gyutaro and their own history of suffering and punishment, to Akaza's own tragic story of rehabilitation. Most of the demons that we are given focus to have some sort of past that we're intended to empathize with, though not every demon comes from some sort of tragic upbringing. Some were twisted monsters before ever encountering Muzan, and one of the best examples of this is the occult ornament orchestrating octopus who overtly objectifies onlookers with an onslaught of the ocean, Gyokko, the 5th ranked Upper Moon demon. Gyokko is one of the 2 major antagonistic forces for the Swordsmith village arc of Kimetsu no Yaiba, and a member of Muzan's 6 Upper Moon demons known as the Kizuki. And while he may rest at the 5th ranked position, amongst his ranks, Gyokko might actually be one of the most intentionally cruel and hateable members of the Kizuki, as he views his torturing and killing of other humans to be an art form, with him mutilating people in a specific way just so that he can find the satisfaction and beauty in their death. And this is all because Gyokko has never valued life or the lives of others, outside of his master of course, and can even be barely considered loyal to other demons, only serving to their hierarchy. And this viewpoint isn't actually a new development for him, as before becoming a demon, Gyokko had already had a strange fascination with death and a hatred of his own kin. But before we get too deeply into that, let's understand the meaning behind his name and design. Starting first with the design, as Gyokko has a rather strange one, with him being just a torso that is impossibly protruding from the confines of a vase or pot, similar to the popular depictions of Jin, though this could also be a reference to one of the magical spirit familiars known as an Agathian, which is a creature that does not possess a true form, but instead shackles itself to a ritual object such as a talisman or, of course, a jar, which, while in the case of Gyokko he does possess a true form, his jar does seem to teleport and move with him. It also appears to be just part of his regular body as well. Now, from his body there also exists a series of smaller arms. Though these arms aren't just small for no reason, they actually are designed this way to resemble that of the arms of children, specifically the ones that Gyokko slaughtered after becoming a demon, as he specifically used the bodies of the children in his previous life's village to shape his new one. While the face of the demon appears to be inspired by the abstract art movement to some degree, with the eyes and mouths locations being swapped. As well, Gyokko's eye design is very similar to that of the other Kizuki, with both of his pupils being replaced with his rank. But above the main eye on the forehead also exists a symbol that is comprised of 3 dots. This symbol seems to draw inspiration from one of the most common map markers in Japanese mapmaking, with the 3 dots often indicating either a tea plantation or a place of importance, which harkens back to not only Gyokko's own overconfidence and egotistical nature, but also his pot and jar theming, as a similar design element has been tied back to other pot-related designs, with one of the most recent ones being Pokemon's Poltergeist from the Kinokami region. Now, name-wise, Gyokko, like most names in Kimetsu no Yaiba, contains within a meaning that ties back to his character and story. And in the case of Gyokko, he has both a demon name and a human one. So let's start first with his human one, which was Managi, and is comprised of the characters for to benefit, fish, and ceremony, which not only relates back to one of his other major design motifs, that being fish, but also ties back to his old hobby of assembling fish corpses that he'd collect from the outskirts of his village into what he would describe as art displays, something that he would go on to eventually replicate on humans in his demon life. Which speaking of, Gyokko's demon name contains the characters for elegance or beauty and pot and jar, so altogether the name essentially means a beautiful or elegant pot or jar. Though this does contain a homophonous connection to gyo, which is the Japanese pronunciation for fish, which feels like a rather intentional decision, which makes Gyokko's name relate to his 2 major design elements that I've described already, pots and fish. As well, the meaning behind his demon name plays directly into the design of his blood demon art. This being porcelain vase spells, in which Gyokko funnels his demonic blood into the creation of some specialized jars that can perform supernatural feats, such as allowing Gyokko to teleport or store an impossibly large quantity of stuff within it. Without using them to perform any specific ritual, the pots themselves are still rather dangerous. And one of the best examples of this is when he pulls an entire adult human inside one of the jars before injecting their broken corpse outwards, which is a scene that may have been directly inspired by the Geb fight in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 3, when the Speedwagon pilot is killed by a canteen of water. Now, the names and designs as well as the effects of the pots may actually draw influence from a number of different places and creatures within both Japanese media and legend, so I wanted to discuss them. So let's start first with the first pot-based attack that we see Gyokko use, this being the 1,000 Needle Fish Kill, in which Gyokko produces a vase with a design of an artistic aquarium in it. Then the pot itself produces large goldfish-like creatures which inflate before releasing a series of poisoned needles. This attack seems to draw inspiration from multiple places. First, of course, the goldfish spawned from the jar seem to be based off of the telescope goldfish, which are a popular subspecies of goldfish traded in Asian territories during the early 1800s, though the process of inflating before releasing a series of spikes seems to be similar to that of a porcupine or pufferfish, and the poison needles could draw inspiration from the pufferfish being one of the most poisonous species of fish that people try to cook and eat, though the attack itself seems to draw inspiration from the ice assassin Haku and the secret water art 1,000 Flying Water Needles of Death from Naruto, with Gotouge claiming that Naruto, much like JoJo earlier, was one of the biggest influences when writing Kimetsu no Yaiba. There's also just some general elements from this arc and Muchiro as a character which can tie back to Haku as well as the village hidden in the mist arc of Naruto. Though Gyokko can also use this fish generating power in a different way, as he can take his jars mixed together with the bodies of his victims and his artistic talent to create fish demon jars, which are large fish-like creatures with human limbs. Though sometimes he can create other types of creatures with different types of limbs, such as massive razor-sharp crab claws. Though these fish demon jars always seem to be fused together with one of Gyokko's jars, and work as a minion for him. But these thralls don't seem to possess any greater intelligence, and usually just stick to maintaining the task they were assigned when they were created. Their creation could also be a reference to one of the most common types of Japanese yokai, the Tsukomogami, which is a tool or object that is possessed by a spirit. Now, these objects usually need to reach 100 years of age, but given the fact that it's been 113 years since the Kizuki were last assembled together, and Gyokko is claimed to have created an uncountable number of jars, the jars used to create these fish demons work perfectly with the concept of Tsukomogami. As well, throughout history, Tsukomogami have become sort of the minion class yokai within certain stories. Following this, we have the water prison pot, which originates from a vase that depicts a massive series of waves, which seem to be designed in a way to take influence from one of the most iconic pieces of Japanese art, this being the Great Waves off of Kanagawa, which was created by the famous Japanese woodblock artist Hokusai, though the shapes of the waves themselves, being more right-sided, might actually suggest that the drawing used for inspiration was Kaiju no Fuji, a similar creation of Hokusai explicitly made for the 100 Views of Mount Fuji collection. Now, the pot itself can generate an impossibly large amount of water, which then hones in on a target and reshapes itself into a vase-shaped prison, with reinforced walls by Gyokko's blood that prevents piercing attacks from being effective. Now, the intention of the technique is specifically to drown their target, and the longer that they stay inside the prison, the less air they have in their lungs for breathing style based attacks. And much like the last technique, I believe that this blood demon art is based off of a jutsu from Naruto, specifically the water prison jutsu, which was originally used by Zabuza during the Hidden Village in the Mist arc, with both being nearly indestructible from within and requiring some sort of outside assistance to overcome. The only real difference is that the prison technique within Naruto isn't directly designed to drown someone the same way Gyokko's is. The next pot which Gyokko would produce during the fight is that of Octopus Vase Hell, which is a large red vase with octopus sucker-like designs all across its body. Now, when used, it releases a large destructive mass of octopus tentacles that smash everything around them. Now, the design of this attack seems to be based off of something rather interesting, that being octopus pots, which is a fishing technique used in Japan where fishermen will leave out a large collection of ceramic pots within the water with the purpose of attracting octopuses. And due to the natural curiosity and desire for comfort, octopi will climb inside the jar freely without the requirement for bait, and once inside, it never attempts to escape even after the vase or pot has been received from the water, as it considers the comfort of the pot to be greater than any perceived danger outside of it. As well, the size of and focus on the tentacles of the octopus produced from the jar has me believing that this may be in reference to the Akoro Kamui, a deity-like octopus that resides in Hokkaido and originates from the Ainu tribe, with the name being roughly translated to the tentacle-holding Kamui. This creature is essentially Japanese equivalent to the Kraken, destroying boats and causing havoc, and often only being seen in the form of its massive red tentacles. Then the final pot-based attack that we see Gyokko use is the 10,000 Flying Slimefish, in which Gyokko reveals a series of vases with the designs of two fish sharing a space on them. And from these pots, a school of what appears to be demonic mackerels are launched, creating a wave of fish that Gyokko insists would be able to devour someone to the bone if they are to strike. Now, the artistic inspiration behind this attack could be Utagawa Hiroshiga's The River Trout painting, as it depicts a similar wave of fish, though the fish depicted in Utagawa's work are of course trout and not mackerel like Gyokko's attack. Now this attack, similar to the Thousand Needles, has a poison element to it, as if a swordsman is able to deflect or destroy the summoned mackerel, they can release a poison into the air that can be absorbed through the skin, and the effects of this attack could be based off the idea of mercury poison, as mercury levels within mackerels are relatively high in large quantities, and it has led to some health concerns involving the consumption of mackerels. As well, mercury can be absorbed through the skin, and can be highly toxic if it is. Now, there are jars created by Gyokko which are not part of any directly named attack, such as the Death Throes of Smiths, or the semi-anime original jar, as while he does use a similar one in the manga, it doesn't seem to have the same screen presence as the one in the anime, that allows Gyokko to manipulate the water within it into a whip-like structure, similar again to how Geb works from JoJo. And the design on the body of this pot seems to be a series of colorful ripples, which to me emulates the surface of water during a rainstorm. Though this pot creating ability is not his only talent, and may actually be tied to a greater power of his, as the appearance that he wears is simply that, an outer shell which masks his true form, as the skin can be shedded in an instant to reveal the being underneath. This is Gyokko's perfect form, finely crafted with scales that are reinforced to the point that they're tougher than diamonds, and hands full of webbed fingers which seem to be stained a specific teal color, which might actually be a intentional design element that relates back to his pottery themes as a character, with the hands of potters tending to be stained different colors during their work due to the constant contact with clay or other materials. And the hands of Gyokko are actually rather important to how his powers work, as they possess a terrifying ability in and of themselves, which might have allowed him to create the monstrosities that we've seen so far. He calls them his godlike hands, and they allow Gyokko to turn anything he touches into a clay-like status that he can reconstitute into anything he desires, though he usually just opts into making them turn into fish. Now, using this natural ability of his, Gyokko can perform one of his most deadly abilities, the Killer Fish Scales, which is a barrage of super fast strikes, all with the intent of turning his target into their next work of art. Now, the overall design of Gyokko's own perfected form seems to relate back to one of the legends of the Nin-gyao, or mermen in Japanese history, as from the early instances of mermen appearing in Japanese folklore, they were described as man-eating demons right up into the Edo period. They were also described as hideous to behold in most cases, with most mermen being illustrated with terrifying faces, long hair, and bodies made up of scales, as well as excess body parts in weird locations. For example, some were depicted with having 3 eyes on the side of their body, which may actually be an explanation for Gyokko's own eye and mouth placement, outside of just the abstract art inspiration. Now, him referring to his hands as godlike may also help us understand one of his other design influences a good bit. This being, I believe Gyokko takes inspiration from the Japanese deity related to water, fish, fishery, and business as well as wealth, that being Ibisu, as the legend of Ibisu describes him as a being once known as Hiriko, one of Izanagi and Izanami's first children. Hiriko was an unfortunate boy, born with no limbs or bones, a pale torso that struggled to survive until he was tossed into the ocean on his 3rd birthday, and soon his form would wash ashore amongst the members of the Ainu tribe Ibisu Saburu. From here, he would begin to be associated with the ocean and anything that washed ashore from it. Soon people's faith allowed him to gain the strength to stand stand amongst the other kamis and go on to become one of the 7 fortune gods of the Shinto faith, often being paired next to Daikokuten, which of course a lot of the elements from this story can relate back to Gyokko's own design, from his limbless torso appearance to even the relation to wealth tying directly back to the only reason that Muzan appreciated Gyokko's existence, as the pots and jars which Gyokko would create in gift to Muzan were of such high quality that he could sell them in order to fund his research in double lives. Alongside this, Abisu's association with the things that drift ashore reflect Gyokko's own life before he became a demon, whereas he would often collect the remains of fish and other things that would wash ashore on the edge of his fisherman's village, assembling these corpses into his own art. And the creation of these grotesqueries are what led the other children in his village to end up mocking him, and would eventually lead to him being completely ostracized by the rest of the village. Though, while he was alone, he was not lonely. Left with only the parents who brought him into this world, Gyokko would continue to create his art, until one day, when he would end up losing that very family, as they had left to go collect fish like any other day, only to wash ashore a broken and nearly unrecognizable mess. This moment would normally be an extremely traumatizing one for most, but for Gyokko, it actually ended up awakening something much darker, an almost fetishistic fascination with death. And soon enough, this would lead him to killing one of the children who would routinely mock him for his work. Stuffing their bodies into a vase that he had recently created, his goal was to recreate the perceived beauty of death in an artistic form. This of course led to the parents of the child gathering together a mob, and they raided Gyokko's estate, and he would find himself impaled and pinned to the ground with a harpoon. And on the verge of death, the villagers abandoned him, hoping he would suffer for his actions. This night just so happened to be the same one in which Muzan stumbled upon the man, and seeing an opportunity to create a powerful demon, he blessed Gyokko with his blood, resulting in the thing we know today. As well, his monstrous obsession with the artistic expression of death and over-the-top personality all seemed designed specifically to play a foil to the Hashira who would then go on to claim his head, as Gyokko's rampage would see him facing off against the Mist Hashira, Muchiro Tokito, a reserved and extremely young demon slayer who is also someone that witnessed the death and decomposition of one of their only family members, a moment that filled him with such intense rage that it motivated him to become a Hashira within 2 months of joining the Corps. As well, Muchiro's own reserved nature plays very well off of Gyokko's own showboating and egotistical nature, with the boy often sandbagging or no-selling Gyokko's own taunts, frustrating the fish into making mistakes. As well, to relate back to Abisu the Kami, their story often represents overcoming a great struggle at a difficult point in one's life, with his birth leaving him helpless to the world and having to recreate himself from the beginning. It is an encouraging tale that relates to Muchiro's own history, as both of them originate from treasured bloodlines, with Abisu being one of the children of the creator gods in Japanese legend, whereas Muchiro originates from the same bloodline as the cultivator of the breathing styles as a whole. As well, both Gyokko and Muchiro were essentially robbed of their homes and lost their ability to feel emotion, turning to a profession which they poured their soul into, though where Gyokko's passion led him to be a cold, egotistical monster that revels in his own expression. In exchange for his empathy, Muchiro lost all trace of his ego, forced to shape himself into a tool. But it is through their battle with the monster that Muchiro is able to rediscover himself, and eventually, the boy topples one of the upper 6 Kizuki, beings who stood undefeated for hundreds of years, single-handedly. Ultimately, Gyokko is a character which Gotouge seems to have created with the express purpose for us to hate, with even Muchiro declaring that someone like him shouldn't even bother trying to reincarnate before shredding his head beyond repair. And they've never been reimagined either, as in the official AU created by Gotouge for Demon Slayer, Gyokko appears in it in his direct form. He is not reimagined like some of the other more forgivable demons in the series. And that's what sort of makes him unique, as Gyokko's vileness extends long before his time as a demon, and his actions are something that could only win him favor in the eyes of another monster like Muzan, whose feelings for him began and ended at the value of his art, especially given the 4 coma bonus chapters that we see involving them. And that's honestly what makes him such a well-done bastard of a character. We want to see him get picked apart like we do, hoping afterwards that his soul gets singed like a kiln in Avicii. And with that all said and done, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/medinotthebadguy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want something with the equivalent power to one of Gyokko's jars, well, I can definitely recommend the power of Shimoneta, Boring World with Tons of Dirty Jokes doesn't exist at byshimoneta.com.